welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this 2024 webinar, Move the Money series, Guaranteed Income. This is the first of our Move the Money series, so it's really great to have all of you joining us today. I'm Sherilyn Seeley. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Grantmakers in the Arts. And before we begin the webinar, please take a moment to review the Zoom features so that you have an optimal experience with us today. So we can go to our next slide. You can use the chat function or the closed caption function. I'll get into that in a moment. So if you have a question for our tech team during the webinar, you can send a direct message to LGC Tech Jess in the chat. So just make sure that you're specifically directing the message to Jess. Otherwise, you can use the chat function, slightly different to our other webinars, but you can use the chat function to submit your questions, but know that we will address them later on when we get to the Q&A section of the webinar. Also, if you'd like your experience to include closed captioning, you can use the closed caption feature in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and you can select Show Subtitles. All right. So Grantmakers in the Arts believes that no worker, including artists, should be stuck in worries about basic economic survival. What are the models that we can look to for examples to reconcile this? And how are arts supporters working with policymakers to expand these models to serve more artists across cities and states? So to answer that question, we are glad to have Sara Fenske Bahat, CEO of Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, Ricardo Beaird, Community Development Director, Springboard for the Arts, Kevin Dublin, educator, advocate, and writer, and Kasey Wiedrich, Financial Capacity Manager for the Office of Financial Empowerment for the City of St. Paul. We're also going to be dropping a link into the chat that will give you access to some starter resources for the webinar. We'll be making reference to some of those resources that you'll see. You'll be able to scroll down and see those links there. And we also will be sharing some links out during the webinar. So just keep checking in with your chat box, even if you don't have any questions, because we'll be dropping some resources in there. And with that, I'll kick it over to our GIA's President and CEO, Eddie Torres, and also following Eddie, we'll have Marina Lopez, funder organizer for Art.coop, to give a little bit more information about the series and add context to our discussion today. All right, take it away.
Thank you, Sherilyn. I'll start out by joining our national field and expressing our gratitude for your great leadership, Sherilyn Seeley. You have been a great leader for Grantmakers in the Arts and the national field of arts and culture. Thank you for all that you do and all that you are. As regards guaranteed income, philanthropic funding to provide direct payments to artists and other workers and residents are essential, but they'll remain essential until local, state, and federal government begin providing these direct payments themselves, as we'll discuss in today's webinar. Therefore, funding support for direct payments must be coupled with funding support for advocacy for changes to government practice. Grantmakers in the Arts are so honored to share the voices of great leaders in the guaranteed income space, public servants, nonprofit leaders, and artists. Kevin, Sara, Kasey, Ricardo, thank you. Grantmakers in the Arts are also honored to partner throughout this webinar series with the artists at Art.coop, with whom we've partnered for years. It is my honor to introduce from Art.coop, Marina Lopez. Marina?
Hello, thank you so much, Eddie. My name is Marina Lopez, whatever feels good. I'm a co-organizer with Art.coop, specifically around funder organizing. Joining you today from Wiyot Land, or also known as Eureka, California. I'll just share a little bit about Art.coop and a little about our sweet history of collaborating with Grantmakers in the Arts. As some of you here today may know, in 2020, performing arts strategist and cultural organizer Nati Linares and artist and researcher Caroline Woolard responded to an RFP that was put out by Grantmakers in the Arts. GIA was looking for recommendations for how to create programming around arts for economic justice. And what came out of that was this really beautiful 120-page report entitled Solidarity, Not Charity, Arts and Culture Grant Making in the Solidarity Economy. But this, what this really was a cultural organizing project where they interviewed over 100 artists and culture bearers across the US who are creating models for self-determination and community wealth, and who are a part of this broader solidarity economy movement. After the release of that report in the fall of 2021, with the support of GIA and the GIA community, as Art.coop, we hosted our first public event, which was a 7-week learning series called Study into Action. In 2022, we continued our collaboration with GIA by co-hosting the first of this series, Move the Money, and we're really excited to be back to Move the Money again with you all in 2024. This series is really cool because it's going to pair technical experts with experts of experience. So bringing in people who have all the technical know-how of how to do these different things, and people who have the lived experience, often artists and culture workers who are building this kind of infrastructure, to give you a really holistic sense of how to go about working in these different ways. And so coming into 2024, Art.coop, we are really clear that we're a hub where artists get money, ideas, and tools to strengthen their communities. And we're a part of the movement to remember the future art worlds with community control at the core. And we work for a future in which artists who are closest to the pain of economic exploitation know their power, and they use it to transform the system. And while Art.coop is located in the US, we know that we're also a part of this international solidarity economy movement. So thank you again, Eddie and GIA, for having us and for continuing this collaboration. I will pass it over to Ricardo.
Hello. Hi, GIA. My name is Ricardo Beaird. I'm the Community Development Director at Springboard for the Arts. I am zooming in from our office in St. Paul, Minnesota. And to ground what I'd like to offer today, I'd like to play a video first from a local to me artist, Deja Joelle. I'll tell you a little bit more about her after the video, but what I will offer before the video is for you to, during the video, give a comfortable amount of attention to your body. Where do you need to stretch? Are you breathing? How are your shoulders? Just offering a quick body check-in. All right, let's play the video.
Everyone deserves to live and thrive. Everyone deserves rest. Everyone deserves to not have to choose between food or their prescription. Everyone deserves to breathe. We deserve to dance. We deserve to spend time with our loved ones. We deserve to create our lives. We deserve income. We deserve guaranteed income. We deserve.
Thank you so much for watching that. I'll invite you to throw into the chat any sort of short reflections or feelings or colors or words that are coming up for you after watching that video. Deja Joel is an African-centered healing artist, choreographer, and director. She created this video to reflect the need for guaranteed income through offering a meditation. So this meditation works to create space for rest and restorative movement and dance, and more importantly, to remind us that we are all deserving of those things, right? I think there's something really profound about that idea that we all deserve to dance, that everyone deserves to dance. And I think we really surface those themes around that in that video, around breath and deservedness. And I believe those kind of fundamental human connections sometimes get left out of work that is around policy change, or work that is aiming towards policy or system change or economic justice. And I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. It's a sense of release, amazing peace, breath, and waves. I love the breathing. I felt my heart rate slow and deeper breaths, a reflection of what I've heard folks experience: beautiful beauty, breath, body, movement needs. Yeah, I wanted to uplift those things because, yeah, I think some of those get lost in conversations about policy or guaranteed income specifically. To backtrack a bit, I work with Springboard for the Arts. Let me go to the next slide. Springboard for the Arts is an economic opportunity and community development organization that's run by artists for artists. This is a visualization of Springboard's strategic vision for the future. It compromises of these three interlocking goals or priorities. Our vision is a future where artists are essential to vibrant and just local economies, leading to more humane systems. And the guaranteed income work that we've been doing for the past 3 years speaks directly to all three parts of our focus and involved from our experience working with artists over the past several years. At Springboard, we provide very practical resources for artists on how to make a living and make a life. This includes business skills training, legal referrals, access to capital. And during the height of the pandemic, our focus shifted to emergency relief. We raised nearly $2 million and supported close to 4,000 artists in our region with direct emergency relief. And we also assisted artists in navigating unemployment and other systems ill-suited for them due to their status in the economy. I think artists often occupy this kind of gray area between gig workers and small business owners, making them susceptible to falling through the cracks of safety net programs. So we were really proud to provide emergency relief and help others set up emergency relief funds. But we wanted to look beyond that, and our aim shifted to address the root causes of why there's a need for emergency relief and wanting to contribute to systemic change. And guaranteed income emerged as a significant interest for us, especially with this St. Paul's leadership in the movement. Mayor Melvin Carter's involvement with Mayors for Guaranteed Income as one of the presidents of that movement, it really helped spur our engagement in guaranteed income. And then along with support from the Economic Security Project and the Ford Foundation, the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, and the Bush and Crexey Foundations. So again, to backtrack more, what is guaranteed income? Guaranteed income is a monthly cash payment given directly to individuals. It is unconditional with no strings attached and no work requirements. A guaranteed income is meant to supplement rather than replace the existing social safety net and can be a tool for racial and gender equity. So St. Paul initiated a citywide guaranteed income pilot, which you'll hear more about from Kasey in a moment, and really aligning perfectly with our goals to connect our work to larger movements and demonstrate that artists deserve and should be a part of scaffolding economic justice interventions. And in our first pilot year, we started small with 25 artists here in our neighborhood, Frogtown and Rondo in St. Paul. And those 25 artists were drawn at a random from our pool of artists who had just received emergency relief support from Springboard. An important piece of this for us, especially because we are working with artists, and so much of how we work with artists, or how artists have had to navigate this world, is through competitive systems. So we were really trying to remove any kind of competition or application out of this process. And that was a real challenge that we set for ourselves in doing this as non-competitive as possible in a way that doesn't pass that kind of selection burden onto artists. Along with providing guaranteed income to artists in our neighborhood, we collaborated with the city of St. Paul on narrative change projects. And these projects aim to create new narratives around guaranteed income, around social safety net programs, dispelling harmful stereotypes rooted in racialized and class shame. And I'd like to share just a few of these projects. You already saw one of those projects, which was Deja Joel's video that I showed at the top of this. We were also excited to have mother musician, loop artist, Kashimana, who recorded an EP called Prosperity Sounds, singing about the systems that lead us to need a guaranteed income, and highlighting the women in these systems and their work and their sacrifices. And I'll share with you at the end of this a link to all of the projects where you can encounter some of those. There was also, this is, picture of Kashimana performing this EP on the steps of the Capitol. There was also Katie DeSalle, who's a storyteller and a radio host. She created these audio postcards that have a QR code with a link to a produced podcast interviewing current participants in the pilot, the Guaranteed Income pilot, describing why the program worked for them and their family. And these audio postcards were free to the public, available in coffee shops and libraries, and really inviting people to listen to these stories and then send those stories to someone else who they thought would benefit from hearing that story, whether that's a family member, another community member, a legislator. And then the last project I'll show is a coloring book. Brianna Williams created this coloring book, and we can press play on this. There's no sound. Brianna Williams, she was a muralist and an illustrator, and she created this coloring book called Exhale. to uplift and remind others to dream and rest and take care of oneself. This book featured images of self-care rituals and ice cream and other forms of rest and joy and things that are made possible when there are resources available to help you take care of your basic needs. We have now expanded our pilot. We have 50 artists in St. Paul now, 25 in Otter Tail County. And one of the goals of this work was to conduct research to influence policy, specifically demonstrating the impact of guaranteed income. Some of those goals are, let me actually just skip ahead. Some of those themes that came up for us was financial stability, being able to pay basic needs, being able to think about longer term planning, increase in resiliency, having just that $500 in knowing that was coming month to month helped with unexpected emergencies or things that came up. And then a piece that I want to bring up is shifting exclusionary art world practices. So a lot of these artists reported thinking about their practice in different ways and not thinking about what is the thing that is going to sell, or do I need to front load some of my trauma in order to get funding or in order to collaborate with this institution, but really having the freedom to try new things and risk doing risky things with their art, or doing art specifically for their community and uplifting the stories that they were hearing from their community. I think that is my time. So I'm going to pass it over to a collaborator for me and a partner in this work, Kasey from the City of St. Paul's Office of Financial Empowerment. Over to you, Kasey.
Hello, and thank you so much, Ricardo, and thank you so much for GIA for inviting me to be here today. And let me move the slides forward. So I'm here to talk more about the work that's happening in St. Paul and a little bit about what the city's done and our work with Springboard. So I'll jump right in. So our work in the city around guaranteed income really came through the interest of our mayor, as Ricardo said, Mayor Carter, and when the pandemic started in 2020, we first sort of launched really early, like a direct cash program that was a one-time payment to families and to businesses to help them cover rent and other expenses as, businesses were shutting down in that first lockdown. And through that, our mayor got connected into that national movement of the Mayors for Guaranteed Income with Mayor Tubbs, who was already a close partner of our mayors, to help us launch that work in St. Paul and also help build this national movement. And we sort of have a map in here showing, the success of how quickly this spread. There'll be a little bit more talk about this later from the work with the Economic Security Project. And I know there's so many pilots, so the font is so tiny, you can't see where all there are, but there'll be a video later in a following presentation that will talk a little bit more about that. So as we were getting started in this work of providing direct, flexible cash to families, launched our first guaranteed income pilot. And our pilot was for 150 families. They received $500 a month for 18 months. And we tied our guaranteed income program to our city's college savings account program. So it's a universal college savings program that starts at birth. And that also launched in 2020. And so all of the families in our pilot had infants or young children were receiving this income, and then were low income and had a COVID impact. And this pilot operated between October 20 and April 2022. And we just recently had our research from this pilot come out. And so just wanted to share some of the findings. And I believe the link of this will be shared with you from the report that was published in December. And so looking at the impact of this over the 18 months, so while families were receiving payments, we did see improvements to their financial health, their financial stability, and their ability to cover, unexpected expenses, start to save, have smooth out income volatility. They also had, very few symptoms of anxiety or depression and had really stable financial health. And this was all during sort of like height of the pandemic and those first early waves. We did see, however, that those improvements in those areas did decline after the payment stopped. So once people stopped getting the spending, there were declines in those incomes. We did see some outcomes that lasted beyond the payments that people received. So employment increased and stayed higher after the pilot ended. And then the other one that speaks to, I think, the power of guaranteed income in that notion of people's sense of themselves and that sense of deservedness, and that people's feelings of hope increased throughout the pilot and continued to tick up a little bit, even 6 months after the pilot. And I think why our researchers and we were so excited about this, because it's even looking at, if we know about those other incomes, their financial stability was going down, but they still had more feelings of hope for themselves and for their future, which really gets at, it's a key part of economic mobility. And I think, again, speaks to that power of the mindset change that guaranteed income people can bring to folks. We did also include a quick quote here from one of the participants in our pilot, which I think for us really gets at the core of the power of guaranteed income and that flexibility. It talks here about how with food stamps, you can't buy winter boots. You can have all this food, but you can't buy the things you need at the time you need them. And this gives people more freedom and flexibility to do the things they need to do when they need to do them. So with this, our success with guaranteed income, we wanted to double down and do more. So we're now doing a second guaranteed income pilot through the city, where we actually are now providing 333 families with a guaranteed income, but it's part of a larger experiment that we've enrolled just over 1,000 families in, where we're looking at guaranteed income and combining that with a large deposit of $1,000 into their children's college savings account, and then also with a control group, so that we will be able to sort of look at this over time in that combining income and assets. But I want to talk now about our work with Springboard, and Ricardo did such an excellent job walking through the projects that we were able to do in our storytelling work together. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the power of having those projects and how we've integrated the work that's come out of them into larger projects in the city. So for example, with the Exhale coloring book, Brianna Williams coloring book, that's been something that we've now provided to college-bound families when they enroll in the program, or, our libraries have used it in events. And there was one instance where our Parks and Rec department used it in some community healing sessions after a shooting incident, because they really felt like the messages around self-care were crucial for family members, and so have wanted to use it. So we've sort of kept that book up and sort of have it available for folks. Kashumana has become a part of events that we have in the city. We've had her open up for us at different conferences and things, and integrated her into different work that we do. But also want to speak to just how having these projects like Deja Joel's video helps people very quickly understand the power of guaranteed income in a very meaningful way, getting beyond just some of the data, getting beyond the numbers. For example, we opened up an advisory meeting full of researchers and policymakers with the meditation video, and had people crying, and it really helps them sort of understand, like, this is why this matters and this is what it can do. And the other stories in the audio postcard, there's also the family that is in that podcast tells a story of, there was an instance where one of their children broke their bikes, and they talked about how before having the guaranteed income, their first response would have been anger at their child, because they wouldn't be able to fix the bike, and it would be a big deal, and like anger that the child would no longer have that bike. But now having this, it's not a big deal. We can fix the bike, and sort of changing their relationship with their child. and how that, and they talked about how that can even help them change their relationship with their community. So having these stories has really meant a lot for our ability to convey what this means to families. And another project I just wanted to highlight too, in working with artists and doing this deeper storytelling, has really helped us sort of tell that story of guaranteed income. We were fortunate enough to be featured in the It's Basic documentary that was really helped produce by Mayors for Guaranteed Income. And so our Mayor Carter, and 3 different St. Paul families are really featured heavily in the documentary. Here we've got a few photos of a screening that we did in St. Paul. And again, I think having these stories, having the families and their stories highlighted in this really amazing film that premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, it's just an incredible resource to help people, again, understand the power of economic, or the power of guaranteed income. And for example, I have some photo here of a screening we did with our Department of Human Services, who's actually one of the funders of our guaranteed income work in St. Paul. We hosted a screening of the documentary with them. It was a lot of county workers, state workers who work within the safety net system, and really had a conversation. And our mayor helped spur this on to help think through, even if our state doesn't have a guaranteed income, how do we think about providing families more flexibility? How do we think about trusting families as the core tenet of our work? And so what does that mean for how we work with families? And it really opened up some really powerful discussions with those state and county employees. And just want to end by talking a little bit about how the work that we're doing to, advocate for guaranteed income at a larger scale, but also build the infrastructure for it. I think for us as the city of St. Paul, from the beginning, I think we have known that we don't think it is sustainable for our city government to fund guaranteed income pilots or programs going forward. So have been thinking through, this is why the work with Springboard has been so important for us to tell that story, to advocate for this to be available at other levels of government and more broadly. So we've been working a lot with other programs like Springboard. We share information, technical assistance. We also work together and often collaborate on the research. We even share researchers across the projects. The city, we've been able to work really closely with our, again, Department of Human Services and other agencies in the state to think through benefits, protections, and counselings. The other, as a note for the audience today, just want to make a note to the importance of combining philanthropy with public funding for guaranteed income, because in our current safety net, the way it's set up, receiving a guaranteed income can count against your SNAP or food stamp benefits, but it doesn't if it's combined with privately funded dollars. So even if there is in your area public funding for guaranteed income, having philanthropy, in the mix in that program can help families participate without losing other benefits. And as we think through a broader advocacy strategy to expand guaranteed income nationally, but also particular within the state of Minnesota, there right now, Springboard and the city, our pilot started in 2020, but there are now 10 other guaranteed income programs who have launched or are starting in Minnesota. So it's really taken off here. But how do we advocate at a state level for state funding is our next hope, is really working with Springboard to do a next phase in the storytelling and narrative change work, where we're thinking through how do we not just talk about the work in St. Paul, but how do we work with artists to tell the story of what's happening across Minnesota. And we're just launching that, and so haven't figured out the parameters of it, but we're really excited about where we go next. And with that, I think we can turn it over to sort of go beyond Minnesota, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sara.
Thank you, Kasey. You guys, I have known about this project for a long time, and every time I hear you talk about it, I'm so wowed. For everybody who's here, we've been in rehearsals for weeks, and it's really, really powerful to be present in the room. So thank you for all that you do. So my name is Sara Fenske Bahat. I run Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco. I actually wasn't at YBCA when we started our pilot. My history with guaranteed income goes back into the late year post-election 2016. Michael Tubbs was elected in 2016, and in the Bay Area, many people were had a lot of feelings about the 2016 election. And many of those feelings were around income inequality, which is a very specifically felt topic here. I think most people know that we have a massive housing crisis, which disproportionately affects artists. We also have a population that I think is the second highest density of billionaires outside of Switzerland. And I think the tales of our unhoused population are pretty well documented nationally, unfortunately. So, just to set the stage a little bit, we've talked a little bit about Economic Security Project. My involvement with them began late in the year in 2016, really when they were putting together a pool of money to seed Mayor Tubbs' pilot that he ran in 2017. And given that we talked about all of these pilots and the ways in which this community has seeded much of the work that arts organizations were able to take up during the pandemic, I thought it might be useful to share a video with everybody. This is something they produced last year that just gives an overview of their work as it relates to guaranteed income and this notion of pilots to policy, which you've heard a couple people say already. And so let me play this for you, and then I'll walk you a little bit through the ways that YBCA thought about its work here.
From the shores of Santa Monica to the streets of Chicago, from the mountains of Denver to the fields of Cuthbert, Georgia, people are putting food on the table, supporting their families, living better lives with a guaranteed income. This started in 2017 with just 2 pilots receiving seed funds from the Economic Security Project, a bold provocation in Jackson, Mississippi, and the very first municipal-led program in Stockton, California. They shared their playbook and invited others to take up the cause. Now what started as an experiment has become a movement. There are now 100 guaranteed income demonstrations that have been announced across the country. That's over 38,000 people who have received money, no strings attached. People with the power to make choices for themselves, the stability to care for their children, the freedom to explore new careers. For former foster care youth, a guaranteed income was the springboard they needed to complete their college degrees. For Wiedrich, it was a tool to invest in her community by starting a nonprofit for Black girls. For Tamara, it was the stability she needed to prioritize her well-being and family. And they are not alone. 36 million families received the child tax credit in 2021. This groundbreaking experiment helped cut childhood poverty in half, in effect, creating a guaranteed income for children. Can you imagine how this idea will transform our neighborhoods, our communities? It's more than just a check. It's the freedom everyone deserves.
Plug for the GI community of practice for anyone who wants to plug into some deeper questions. I think it's important to show that Marina mentioned us being in solidarity with one another, which does apply to many of the arts organizations working in this space. I think it's also really essential that we see ourselves working more broadly too, not only with other types of organizations, but in a fuller scope of the ways in which we address economic disparity in our communities. And so with their permission, we played that. San Francisco announced that it would fund a guaranteed income program for artists in 2021. And they gave us a little under $1 million to fund that program, which, to Kasey's point, we raised money and grew it to a little bit more than $4 million. That money funded 2 pilot programs here one directly to artists, and one through a conduit group of community organizations. In both cases, there were 190 artists total. In all cases, artists were getting $1,000 a month for 18 months. YBCA is interesting as a entity doing pilots, in my opinion. And this is just meant to demonstrate that. We are a physical location. We are a 125,000 square foot arts organization, multidisciplinary. We do theater, we do dance, we do exhibitions, public art, public programming. We're also in the middle of downtown San Francisco. So in the darkest days of the pandemic, we were closed for the longest period of time as we'd been since World War II. As an organization that is dedicated to being a crossroads for where local arts meet arts from other places, and a place that's really willing to take on challenging material and that thinks deeply about the ways it supports the livelihoods of local artists in particular, we thought that the best way to spend the pandemic would be to invest in the livelihoods of artists. And so I thought it might be useful. One, I think it's interesting to know that we're a physical location. It creates in the current moment more challenges than I think we wish we had. But during the pandemic, we tried a lot of things actually to support artists. Guaranteed income was one of them. And I just want to sort of frame up for you, $12.5 million in the context of YBCA's activities is about a year of our operations. So over the last 4 years, we've spent the equivalent of a full year of what it is to run the center on investing in artists. We've done that in a few different ways. I'm happy to see Ted Russell from Rainin on this call because one of his projects is here. We did direct relief with the state. We hosted artists to talk about what would be valuable in terms of the projects that we might support in their communities. We put together a digital bulletin board. We invested in artist-led giving circles, and we're currently, even though our guaranteed income pilot has ended, we're currently doing an annual living wage to artists working in communities, as defined by the Healthy Communities Index, working on projects that have sort of soft strings attached, I would say. We don't have any creative control or any control over the projects, but they are meant to be doing projects in association with the funds that we're giving them. This has been like, we're in a point of as an organization that's really interesting where we're reflecting on this body of work right now. And a lot of it is work that we're very proud of. And we find ourselves with like a new set of conditions downtown where our pendulum has swung with this request that we reopen very loudly to contribute to the recovery of downtown San Francisco. And so as a team, we're really reflecting on how proud we are of this work and how we can embed it into the life of the organization indefinitely, and asking ourselves some, somewhat challenging questions around that. I think the interesting thing coming out of it that I know for sure is there's this notion of R&D in many nonprofit spaces. I think putting R&D and sort of this commitment to innovate, to listen to community and respond into the DNA of an arts organization is the highest priority that I can identify as having come out of our commitment to this work. And so that is something that is now happening at the budget level, which is pretty interesting. Every year, beginning in the fiscal 25 year, we're making a commitment to set aside money to be responsive to what the community needs. And I think we're looking for things that feel like this, that can rise to the occasion of being useful. It's been really encouraging to be in community with a lot of people. And I'm really happy to welcome Kevin in a second into this conversation, who have participated. The Bay Area is not that big. There are 800,000 people who live in San Francisco, although I think the rumor is that number is down some over the last couple of years. It's not a super big city, and the region is obviously a little bit larger, but many artists that we work with have participated in multiple of these programs. And together, what they've allowed us to do is really be in dialogue about the needs of this community And they've given us information that allow us to examine our own activities and how we're showing up. And that to me feels, at least relative to our peer organizations who are mostly presenting, like a really interesting set of questions for us to be grappling with. Lots of appreciation also. In this moment of reflection, one of the things we hear, and not specifically from Marina or Art.coop, is that there might be confusion around why organizations like YBCA would be acting as funders under these circumstances. And I think we're trying to lean into those questions and to have really good answers to them as we chart our path forward. So I'll leave it there. I'm really happy to welcome Kevin Dublin. I think I get to welcome you. Kevin is somebody that I know from Economic Security Project and YBCA. He's participated in a couple of these things, and he tends to be very generous about sharing his experience. Kevin?
Oh, there it is. Thank you, Sarah, and everyone. Like, yeah, it's been great. It's been great to see one more of the work that's been going on, and see, you know, kind of more directly things from Springboard for the Arts, because it's another one of those projects and programs that I'm like, yes, this is amazing. I was gonna go and just kind of talk about things, but I realized, like, oh wait, I also am a poet. I should poet a little bit. So before jumping into a couple of other things around the, you know, personal and creative impact and, you know, sort of, you know, impact directly there, I'll start here. We begin as a story and end as another story, like catfish who emerge from ice in winter for a bite of nightcrawler bait and become a meal. All it takes is silence to recognize a poem. Leaf climbs down from oak tree between 2 feet. Moment stretches like yawn into eyes, crashing open, crossing the Bay Bridge west and calling it home. City like a mound of fireflies, all lit up in a grove. It takes only a moment to know the cardinal bobbing at the fruit of the dogwood tree is only hunger. The siren flaring its wings in the distance is only death. I am just another animal with a long shadow searching for the origin of my pain like any partner. An officer's hand over holster as a murder of crows scatter from lampposts like a dark dandelion blown by summer's gin. All things were once someone's wish, like how a square part plan with a wave-like geometric place structure in an old neighborhood is sometimes a triumph and sometimes gentrification and sometimes both, all depending on who you are. Today is a reminder that captors will not willingly set you free. Today, we are still a land awaiting justice and democracy. Each of us soldiers on horses with voices galloping towards the wind. So yeah, I was a participant in the GI pilot. I was also a participant in the Artist Power convenings, which, you know, that's really how the first season of the Living Room SF was funded, and that's a project that I launched as a reading series in Salon with a friend, Paolo Bicchieri, but is really becoming a way to create opportunities for Bay Area writers to have direct access to and control over, like, means of cultural production. It's like, okay, how can you do these things to, it's like, it's really resource sharing, in what ways can, like, careers advance? Oh, you don't, write and write grants. Oh, I know some folks who do. It's like, we know, someone who does that. Like, let's pool and share resources, developing, own, kind of like products, whether that's chapbooks or broadsides, to be able to sell at readings, to make work, be able to go to readings and be paid for the work that you're doing, and really just build a community space so the public can engage and have, like, conversations that are sparked from literature and go towards healing. Personally, I think about all the ways that being a participant impacted me. From the biggest thing being able to afford having my son move in and live with me full time in San Francisco, which I was trying to make happen for years. And it came especially during a time where it was like, okay, this is maybe going to be, possible. And then we had this global pandemic where, the community education program I was working for, which was, around teaching like web development, had to close when we were in person, during shelter in place. And so it allowed this sort of like equalizing force there and be able to find more contract work. It was funds to visit my father while he was in hospice and return to North Carolina, because I'm, a little boy from Smithfield, North Carolina, and come back for his funeral. And it was also space to jump into genealogical research, which I have like always said, I'm going to do this when I have time and space. And, anything that we don't make that time and space for is something that it usually does not happen. And so I was able to do that, and am still doing that whenever I make the time and space for it, and dig deep enough that I, encountered the person who, claimed to own my ancestors, including a great grandma Adelaide, and who was also in Smithfield. And he was also just in some weird connection, a soldier who placed the flag and claimed San Francisco, then named Yerba Buena for the United States from Mexico, who claimed it from Spain, who stole it from the Ohlone, who didn't even claim ownership of the land, but knew, we belong to it. And so it's something that is still processing and will become its own creative work. But I think even larger than that is maybe, and I love that resource that should find the link that you posted or on a blog, Eddie, on like, how we can advocate and lobby, and so everyone should check that out. I will get that link and and post it, because having being a participant, it was something that it helped me shift from economic pessimism to being a little more optimistic about things, because guaranteed income was something that I encountered in my undergraduate years through MLK's work, and began to begin to see more as a possibility after, like Mayor Tubbs and the Seed project in Stockton, or Andrew Yang's campaign, and that being this thing that's front and center, and reading Scott Santon's work, all the resources that he was sharing, and being introduced to this wider world of advocacy that I didn't even know was going on, through, amazing places like Economic Security Project, and, just how I've been like this bastion for a lot of this work, or and very much so resources for, and then that became this kind of deeper creative work of impact, in terms of like, okay, how can I bring creative writing into advocacy, whether that's sharing stories of experience, conferences, at rallies, congressional testimony, and direct conversations with people. It led to like literally my last chapbook is called Eulogy, and it is about that time, those last like, my final time with my father, and really inspiration to think about ways like I utilize data as like a part of creative storytelling, and experiment with form, and oh, perfect, yes, you posted it. So yeah, Eddie posted in the chat. You should definitely go to that link, and how that, what are ways that can be a part of work you're doing, and something that I'm deeply interested in, and want to like sort of create space and platform for, outside of, again, people talking to directly. It's like, okay, there is a lot around narrative and a lot of narrative change work happening. And it's like, okay, in what ways can, be a resource for folks who might want to tell their stories and, just might need a little help getting it out and process and have that space to do it creatively. And just before I'm about to, end, and I'm going to pass to Sherilyn, but I'll end with a piece that kind of starts to do that, or play with that idea. So there's a poem by Forrest Gander called "What It Sounds Like," and it's from I can't remember the name of the book. It was like 2 years ago, maybe 3. It won a Pulitzer, and this is a line from that. It's called "If It's Not." This is the kind of like this is a quote from that kind of sparked writing this as well. "If it's not all juxtaposition," she asked, "what is the binding agent?" So this is Ars Poetica. There are about 7,700 unhoused folks in San Francisco. There are at least 13,500 millionaires in San Francisco and over 20 billionaires. There are almost 38,000 unhoused folks in the Bay Area. There are over 275,000 millionaires in the Bay Area. Over 600 millionaires with hundreds of millions of dollars and around 60 billionaires. There are about 7,700 unhoused folks in San Francisco. There are almost 38,000 unhoused folks in the Bay. There are over 800,000 people who live in San Francisco. As Sarah said, there are just about 7 million people living in the Bay Area. There was around $1 billion spent annually by the city of San Francisco to public health, homelessness and supportive housing and community development, human services and children, youth and families, nonprofits. There are around 7,000 nonprofit organizations in the city of San Francisco. There are over 30,000 nonprofit organizations in the Bay Area. There are more than 500,000 nonprofit employees in the Bay Area, and the average salary at a nonprofit is less than $45,000. There are at least 20 nonprofit executives who receive over $1 million in total compensation each year in the Bay Area. The average monthly rent for an apartment in San Francisco is $3,336, and that's $40,032 a year. There are about 7,700 unhoused folks in San Francisco. There are almost 38,000 unhoused folks in the Bay. Thank you, and I'm gonna pass it to Sherilyn.
Thank you so much for that, Kevin, and everybody. That was really powerful and informative. I've been seeing some messages go back and forth in the chat, and it's nice to see that folks are also interacting with each other. And so I think that's great. And we're going to continue with this interaction with our Q&A. Following that, you'll have some time to go into breakout so you can actually kind of talk to each other and process some of what you've heard and share ideas. So if you have any specific questions for our presenters, you can send them into the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat. We'll have a very quick Q&A, probably about 7 minutes. But I want to bring Ricardo into the conversation with Kevin. Really, everyone who presented is going to be here. But for the first question, I wanted to bring you in, Ricardo, because you kind of hold 2 different roles, right? Like you're at Springboard. You have kind of like that arts administrator side, and you're an artist yourself, right? And Kevin was speaking specifically from his artist lens and giving some incredible stats. And so I'm just wondering kind of how you have balanced that dual role, and I think it'd be great to have you chime in too and kind of compare notes, because both of you are kind of working in similar spaces. We can actually bring all of the presenters on camera so we can kind of bounce some questions off of each other. But yeah, if you could share.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm really grateful to work at Springboard where everyone does have some sort of artistic process. It feels like we are like pouring into this artistic community that we also like benefit from and have actual skin in the game. So it's something that helps serve as, our experience serves as a compass for how we're doing our work and who we're doing it for. I also think that, like, I mean, when I think about programs like guaranteed income for artists, I think about like my past, like artist self who was like really splitting themselves between really bad gigs and good gigs and having to say yes to everything, to pour all of my energy and attention into my survival. So I think about the programs that we administer, and I think about well-being for artists and how can we set up pathways for artists to not only pour into their survival, but pour into their family or pour into their communities or pour into other places where they can steward or support things that are important to them. So I think that like lived experience really helps us keep honest and keeps us connected to our values.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I can actually kind of relate to that just because, I mean, I had my time where I was full-time artist, only practicing my art, vocals, dance, and that's it, right? And it was like such a hustle. Oh my goodness. It's like impossible. I mean, it's possible, right? Like I wouldn't be here if it wasn't, but you know, it's if you haven't experienced it, you don't know that it like is really like you're like which gigs you go for, like how many auditions until you get the one. And it's like, okay, but then you have to balance the part-time job and it's so much stuff. And so I can really, from like a personal perspective, appreciate all that you've shared. And I actually want to kick it over to you, Sara, just based on your presentation. What are some of your lessons learned along the way? And I know that some things are kind of still swimming and developing, and I'll kind of leave it there. But what have been
getting comfortable with ambiguity and all the things that come up when you're doing something new that is challenging of the norms of, you know, not only organizational life, but funder life and artist life. I think the thing that scared me most, I was at a conversation with Michael Tubbs before he started his pilot with a bunch of wealthy people that helped fund it. And nobody had lived experience. Just to pull this sort of together, there was this conversation like, well, you know, can't we use the earned income tax credit to deliver this? And I was like, I don't know who you're talking to, but like nobody is budgeting their earned income tax credit like across 12 months. We're paying our holiday bills with this money. Like maybe it's not, it doesn't work that way actually if you, you know, are waiting for your earned income tax credit. And it was interesting, I think, in those days to imagine what would come later. And I worried a lot about what would happen when we stopped making payments. Like I was really, really, really worried about how that would feel for people. And, you know, everyone in these pilots goes really, really far to make sure we communicate well about that and to have a lot of conversations about the other kinds of community support that we're looking to talk about. But, you know, taking away $1,000 a month and all the things we've heard today that includes, especially later in the process, right? Like we did something where we collected 6-word poems every month for whomever wanted to participate. And in the beginning, there was the vibe, basically. The vibe check is this real? And then when you get to the middle and like the middle toward the end, the vibe is like, holy crap, this has changed my life, especially after a year. And then towards the end, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? And like a lot of people really change their lives in a way where the ending, I think you get to prepare for the ending. And while I still wish we didn't have to stop, I do think that like it's good to have good, it's possible to have good endings. And that really surprised me the most. I think that some of the feelings we all had and the worries we all had are why we tried to do other things too. and why we sort of, just held a posture of experimentation and tried to keep ourselves honest around that. There's lots of other people that are adjacent to us that many of the people we work with also work with, doing great work that feels like it's in this family too. And so, not being a silo, but working with others and trying to kind of wrap around the creative practice of the people we were working with in creative ways.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's like life advice there. I think that's awesome. I have like, to be honest, like pulling back the curtain, I have like 7 more questions for you guys today. Some that you might be prepared for, some not. But I'm looking at our time, and I do want to give folks time to kind of interact with each other and chat breakouts. So I'm going to press the pause button on the questions, the Q&A. And we have fine. I won't press the pause button because we just got one in. I'll share out the question, but then we'll still go into our breakouts, and we'll answer the question after. So just so you can kind of be thinking about it. So can you describe an example of a good ending? I was also concerned about what happens next for artists. So something to be thinking about. We're going to transition into breakouts now, and there are some prompts here that I'm going to drop into the chat. I'm going to drop them one at a time, each question. So the first question is, what connections are you making between the values of guaranteed income and your own work? That's the first question. The second question is, how are you processing all of this? I'm sure that there's kind of a lot going through your minds as you kind of hear the different perspectives. And then finally, what lingering questions do you have? We already have yours in, Karen, so no worries. And we'll continue to kind of collate all of those things, okay? So we'll go into breakouts for about 10 minutes, and then we'll bring you back after for a share out, all right? So I'll let our tech Jess transition us. All right, so we're trickling back in. The epic, infamous kind of like slide on back into the main room. And as you all just kind of get settled in, I'm going to kick it over to Marina, who's going to facilitate some kind of chat-based share out for us. So I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you to the folks in my group too. Sorry we got cut off. So just for the sake of time, if people have reflections that they'd like to share, please write them in the chat around any of these questions or other things that came up, and we can share them back with the group. I know that in our group, there were some newer GIA members, which is really exciting to get to meet new people in the community. And I know I saw Maura here, but I shared some of Creatives Rebuilds New York work and the documentary that came out recently about the work that you're doing, and was sharing a little bit about the think tank process and really how you're having conversations with people who have different, like you were saying in this kind of Q&A part, people with different lived experiences, having that be a really important part of how you're designing these kinds of programs. Yeah, other reflections from your breakout groups, other things people want to share, lingering questions that we can maybe send resources and a follow-up message. If there's one person who wants to share it. Okay. Kevin says, Rebecca shared and asked a great question about the possibilities of end-of-life GI programming and funding. Wow. That sounds really interesting. If maybe one person wants to come off mute, I think we might have time for just one person. You will need to ask Jessica, our tech person. Yes, you can ask them to unmute you. Randy says the emerging practices around GBI, artists in residence, cultural strategist, worker protection is really exciting. Absolutely. Any other reflections people want to share? Yeah, also Eddie says there's a lot of overlaps between GI and trust-based philanthropy. And Rebecca's responding about how thinking about artists as they age, how are they supported? Specifically the programs that support artists through end of life. I live with artists in a co-op up to age 89. Wow, that's amazing. Randy's asking, are there existing and emerging networks for practice that one could join to stay engaged? I think someone mentioned the guaranteed income community of practice. Yeah, there we are. No, I saw you, Mara. Thank you for sharing those. Great. Maybe one more reflection before I pass it back to Sherilyn to close us out for the day. Amazing. Yes, Mara, CRNY is such a beautiful resource as well. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing that link. Wonderful. I'll pass it back to you, Sherilyn, to close us out for the day. Thank you, everybody, for your reflections.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that, Marina. I actually want to bring our presenters back, taking a little bit of a left turn. But we mentioned at the top of the webinar that this is the first of a series. And so we're going to be invested in this conversation at GIA in a very specific way over the next few months. And so I'm wondering if there's a particular call to action that you all might invite funders to kind of start thinking about, taking action around, collaborating around. In the meantime, right, while we continue these conversations, we know that we have this community of practice. And now we also know specifically that in terms of guaranteed income, there is a building, movement that we're creating here that folks will be able to leverage and utilize to continue this work. So what is your call to action before we leave? I'm going to have all of you take a moment to share. Ricardo, I see you off mute first, so you can take it away.
I feel like my call to action is pretty soft given the audience, but like artist at the table, right? As you are thinking about processes, ways of incorporating your work into this movement, I invite you to scaffold this with artists, taking advantage of the creativity, the skills, the ways of building that local artists can create and really help this work be a lot more impactful. I think some of our work at Springboard is really about positioning artists as the chief storytellers and connectors and consultants in their own communities. So I just want to encourage people to have that in the front of their mind.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, Ricardo. Artists at the table. All right. Who would like to jump in next?
I'm feeling called.
Right.
Say for funders or for artists or for staff, or organizations that are sort of partners. I think being comfortable with messiness and like the disclosure of messiness is helpful to the creative process. And it is trust-based work. Like if you're only getting the clean version of the story, you're not getting the full thing, and people don't trust you to tell you the whole thing. Like it is, we're in it. We remain at the table, even when it's hard. And if we're sharing that with you, it's an important gesture of trust.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Again, here you are with the life advice. Kevin and Kasey.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess two quick things would be one, back to that link Eddie shared, the call for advocacy. So backdoor advocacy. How thinking thinking about how, like, what is it? The National Association of Realtors is like, I mean, how they, what was it? I knew it. It's like it was like $30 million in like 2022, and like contributions to campaigns and corporate PACs, and then like at minimum like 80 million more that was like spent on lobbying. So there's this like huge corporate interest in control, and there is, if there are, it's not that it's not that, oh, this is like, these are things that are impossible. It's also not like, oh, these are things which, there need to be like new solutions for. There are existing paths to changing like lots, if not all of these things. And they're just, it's like being outspent. So it's like, okay, well, in what ways, outside of like, there can't be these direct contributions, but it's like, okay, but there could be payments to folks for doing things like lobbying in non-traditional ways, which could be more impactful than money. So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about things like that, thinking about things like, another thing that Rebecca shared was like, oh, they were making the organization they work for was making or giving unrestricted grants of like up to $100,000 that, but split it, or they were thinking of trying to find ways to split the payments so that it becomes this sort of things for organizations, which might be like smaller and beginning out. And this becomes a way that like one can scale and do some of that work with folks who are also on the sort of grassroots and doing more like even messier things because they're smaller. So yeah, those.
That's great. Thanks, Kevin. All right, Kasey, bring us home.
Yeah, try to end inspirational. I think, this is something we talked about in our small group about how, right, like guaranteed income didn't seem possible just a few years ago on the scale that it's happening now. And I think we're coming up to a moment of, there's been this explosive growth, but what happens next? And a lot of this explosive growth has been driven by the pandemic, and there were opportunities that opened up because of the pandemic. But I think like we're at a turning point soon, and I think continue to be at the table and fight this fight and fund in these spaces is more crucial going into the future, right? To sort of carry this forward, what we've learned, the trust in families, the deservedness, the flexibility, the providing people this resource to let them live their lives and however they want to live their lives. Particularly for artists, I think, right, like there's got to be a real call to keep that moving forward and not lose the ground that we've lost. So I would make that call to let's keep this moving forward.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Kasey. And I say this all the time, and I'm going to keep saying it, but Lolita Marisha's visionary fiction, the whole idea of that, like once you have the vision, once you kind of put it into your mind as an idea, like what's to say it's not something that can be achieved, right? Like you said, just a few years ago, guaranteed income was like, oh, I don't know, and here we are. So, I love that inspirational kind of like close out. And I want to say an extra special thank you to all of you who have been a part of this presentation, our presenters, Eddie, Marina, who got us started, Jess, who rocked and rolled the tech, and also our communications manager, Jamie, who's actually doing some behind the scenes. So thank you to all of you. And folks who are here, you are going to have access to the email addresses of our presenters. So if you have any lingering questions, they are more than ready and excited to respond to you and engage in conversation with you. You will receive a copy of the slides, as well as a recording of this webinar. So you can be on standby for that. And also, as you can probably already see in the chat, we've shared out a survey. We want to know what you thought of the webinar so that we can continue creating content and programs that you will benefit from. So thank you all so much for being here. Have an excellent day, and we'll see you at the next program. Thanks, everyone.